Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Today we are going into Book 7 of the Ethics, which deals. Book 7 is usually actually is a kind of a new beginning because he's kind of combining something. He's combining his argument. He's taking the discussion of virtues, the virtues and the question of virtues, de- and dealing with the question that arose in the end of book 6 about the intellectual virtues, about this whole problem of, well, it's the problem of you knowing what the right thing to do is, but you're unable to do it for some reason. You're in other words, the question of doing the virtue, doing the right, doing the virtue, doing the action, virtue in that question, but failing, not the getting it wrong, that you don't understand what it is. In other words, it's not an error of your ability of judgment or things like that, but dealing with the question of what, um, you know what is right, you get the right answer, but for some reason you're unable to do the right thing. Now, Aristotle calls this concept acrasia, acrasia, which it becomes a big monster problem for philosophy interpretation of Aristotle, because for a long time the translators would translate it as will, weakness of will, the question of weakness of will. But the problem of using the concept of will in Aristotle is a very important one, because it misleads us. It takes us in directions. This is the problem. This is something that the notes will say, and people talk about, that there's no concept of self in the way modern thinkers come up with, like starting with Descartes and the early modern writers, this idea of the self-actuating will. Starting with Descartes, and can see this from use of Descartes to Hobbes and Kant, and then even Hegel to a great degree, but Kant, and then the reaction against Kant and Gang by Nietzsche and Schopenhauer. Nietzsche is where in other words, where Kant will take the willing agent, but then bind him to duty. That is the whole point of the phenomenology of, the phenomena, the groundwork of metaphysics and morals, where he talks about what needs to be done, right? You have Kant's groundwork of the metaphysics and morals, which is one of the things Nietzsche is fundamentally rejecting, the emancipation of the will, right? Wants to emancipate the will from the chains of reason and duty that Kant imposes on it. And that this direction, this modern direction of the willing agent, is something that, Aristotle doesn't really talk about this in that sense. Aristotle talks about choice. And what choice is not this conception of the natural realm, that man's an agent with an animal within the natural realm, and therefore understands his activity in a certain sense. So today, when we're going therefore the question of knowing what is good but not being able to do it, this uh, which acrasia, which is a major thing in Greek theory. Now, I know some people look at trying to look at it also in Plato, Republic. Um, this is a major theme. This is one of the big themes in political philosophy, or understanding both in Aristotelian political philosophy and also classical political philosophy as a whole, in Greek political philosophy. So this idea of in kratia, which is restraint, the ability that having the mechanism of control and restraint that allows you to do the right thing, to know what what virtue is, now doing it, and restraining yourself and impulses. So therefore, let's turn to the text today. Book 7 is divided into 14 chapters. Today, we're going to be looking at the first chapter, which deals with the kind of the new beginning. Right, this is the new beginning. So let's go into this, and let's go move ourselves over here, and let's go to the text. So after these considerations, after the considerations of looking at the virtue, we deal with the virtues of the body, right? The virtues of the body, which is very interesting. We dealt with the virtues of the three parts of the soul, the physical body of the soul. He says the three parts of the soul, actually there's four parts: the vegetative, which he kind of doesn't deal with an X and a virtue, but the vegetative, animated, then the next the level of the soul. There's two levels of the soul. That is the spirited aspect of the soul, of a higher part. This is more. This is not tied to the body. There's things tied to the body, and things that's not tied to the body, right? And in both, there's two and two. There's the bodily part, and then there is this other part, the spirit part. The spirit part is both mind and lumos, and anger, and which is tied to the body to some degree. But the spirited part is the part where it is kind of connected to the body, but higher than the body. Honor, love, these higher things, and that explains why there is a distinction between book 3 and 4 of the Ethics. Why he does in 3 his introduction of what virtue is, but then he deals with the bodily part, and then book 4 he deals with the things that are not that, and then book 5 was justice, the interrelations of virtue that's tied to each other, and then book 6 dealt with the mind. Right now he's dealing with the question in book 7. Well, why does not virtue? What prevents people from engaging in virtue? Okay, and we're going to start it in here. So this is why, after considerations, we must make another beginning, and say that there are 3 forms of things pertaining to character that must be avoided. So, vice, lack of self-restraint. Again, this is acrasia, and brutishness. Or savagery, right? This is or savagery, brutishness or savagery. The term theros is related to the word elsewhere translated as beast or brute animal, theron, right? This is brutishness or brute animal, or the theron or theorates. So this is the savagery or something. This. So the lack of self-restraint, vice. Vice is the opposite of virtue. Deals with the base. Instead of looking at the kalan, beautiful things, you look at the base things, the ugly monsters, this is the evil things, you can say. The evil things. I mean, this is what probably we would say vice. We don't want to avoid the word evil here. I mean, some people want to avoid the word evil because evil is outside with Christianity and monotheistic Christian conceptions. But I think there is something. There is a notion of evil in the sense that it's the opposite of the good, right? The evil and the good are kind of like not polar opposites, but this is something that Saint Augustine will argue about in his work. But let's go look at this carefully here. So these are 3 things we must avoid in virtue, right? The character, pertaining to character, vice, right? Lack of self-restraint, and brutishness, right? Or savagery, right? The contraries of two of these are clear. One contrary we call virtue, the other is self-restraint. But as for the contrary of brutishness, it would be especially fitting to speak of the virtue that is beyond us, a certain heroic and divine virtue, just as Homer has written, when Priam says about Hector that he was exceedingly good, but he did not seem to be a child of any mortal man, but of a god. Right? This is Iliad. In other words, there's something about there's the contrary here is if virtue. The contrary is to vice is virtue, right? In that sense, and the other one is self-restraint. See, if vice, the contrary here is okay. Let's divide this into 3 things here. Already. We're giving you we're getting 3 things that we must avoid: vice, lack of self-restraint, and brutishness or savagery. This is then opposed, two we know easily. This is what the vice, the first two, would be vice to virtue, right? Virtue is its opposite. And second would be, uh, 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 two of these are clear, right? And the other one is uh, 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 self restraint or enkratia, right? Uh, 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 this is that thing in that sense. But Britishness, well, what is the opposite of Britishness? Is it this divine, heroic? And he gives the example of Homer, right? He gives the Homeric example that we get the reference to Homer. Priam says about Hector, right? He was so exceedingly good, but as a child, he didn't look like he wasn't born of a noble man. He was born like of a god, right? As a result, if, as people assert, human beings become gods through an excess of virtue, it is clear that something of this sort would be characteristic opposite to brutish. In other words, if we become, because of our virtue, we become God like gods, which is what? Heroic and divine. Now, here, this is important because we Christians, when we think about gods, we think of Christians, we Christians, okay, Christians in that sense, but also Jews and Islam. When we think about gods, we think of God, right? God is what? God is this omnipotent, immortal being beyond existence, the creator of all things. This thing, and this is not how the Greeks and the people thought about their gods. Gods were just beings. So, the Plato's. The philosophic God is an arche, the beginning. Aristotle, in his metaphysics, will call God merely the beginning point, right? The beginning point, the arche upon all things, the thing thinking itself, the thing that reflects upon itself, the arche in that sense, the ultimate arche, the ultimate thing thinking itself. Everything else rests upon. Um, uh, um, Not as a kind of being that creates everything that's outside existence and being, that it is being itself. In other words, it is being itself. It is the structure and ontology of existence. And this is for Aristotle. And I would argue to some degree, Plato also. But whereas for the Christian world and people who believe in it, we believe the God is other. But what about the pagan gods? When they talk about the gods, not the God, but the gods. Well, the gods in this sense, the pagan world, are just beings, superior beings. They may have longer lives. They're just beings who are divine, and divine is holy and things. They're not. They may be immortal. They may be immortal, and they might have more knowledge. They may have some kind of they're unlimited by time, and because they're unlimited by time, they have more knowledge about nature than we do. Us mortal, limited creatures have very much limit. Our time is limited, and therefore our knowledge is limited, and also our power is to some degree limited. So therefore, the gods are not necessarily totally omnipotent, but as this. But I'm bringing this in here to understand the reference to the gods here. So we have to understand that the gods here is that we can become like God. Virtue make us God-like, and that we are hot. We have more capacity. The question is, we become divine in the sense that when we have virtues, something makes us godlike. In that sense. This is that, and that it is clear that something of this sort would be a characteristic opposite to brutishness. So notice this, that it's not the human. The initial suggestion here is not the opposition is between brutishness or savagery and the human, but rather the divine, the godlike. So that's interesting. Why not the human? Why not the human versus the thing? Or is really the human the tension between the God and the beast, right? And that gives us a reference to book. Gives us this makes a good comparison. This what he says here should make us think of what he says in book 1, chapter 2 of the Politics, where he speaks about man outside the polis. Man outside of the polis is either a beast or a god. So it's the polis where the human is fully human. Outside the polis, man is either a beast or a god. And this is, but therefore, wait a minute, this is the tension, the beast or the god. The humans are within the framework of beast or godness. And that the polis is a balance, a place where the man and the god, man is more man, and I mean both God and man, beast, but he's less beast and not necessarily fully God, but at least not beast-like. Okay, so let's continue here in that sense, right? For just as a brute animal has neither vice nor virtue, so also a god does not. So also a god does not either. What? Okay. He doesn't have vice or virtue. Rather, the characteristic belonging to a god is more honorable than virtue, and that belonging to a brute animal is some genius other than vice. So virtue is something interesting. Virtue is said to be something human. What the gods possess is beyond virtue. This is interesting. Oops, sorry about that. That was I should have put my phone on silent, so I'll do that in front of you right now, so you know I'm a good boy. This is what I sometimes I forget about something. And ring, ring, ring. And probably we probably have another interruption here soon. Um, so therefore, this is idea here of that the human is something that the God is beyond virtue. Something is greater than virtue. It's more higher than virtue, and the beast does not have virtue or vice in that sense either. The beast is not. You know, the beasts are incapable of virtue or vice. Therefore, they have something bad. It's not vice in our sense. Um, and I think remember that vice is something choice or intentionally choice worthy. Animals, we can have this is a big discussion in Aristotle. I don't want to go into it. This is why I have the Reeve's book on animals, translation of his and Martha Nussbaum, the movement of animals and things like this has been a big issue and to understand whether animals have how the human and the animal are connected. Larry Arnhart and Roger Masters have written lots of stuff on this, the question of political animals. Bernard Yard's book on problems of the political animal this is a big question, the political animal question. So therefore, we're very much interested. But the God question here is like this, right? So therefore, the brute animal, therefore, vice and virtue are not something they're outside of animals. Gods and beasts don't have virtue and vice in this sense. It's only the human. And since it is a rare thing for a man to be divine, just as the Laconians are accustomed to address someone when they admire him as divine man. They assert, so also the brutish person is rare among human beings, he being present among the barbarians especially. But although some cases also arise through both disease and defects. So, in other words, okay, let's stop here. This is Aristotle's quotation. Certain Laconians, they call it divine man or divine person. It's a Laconian variant of the word divine, seros rather than theros. Right? There is this distinction that the Laconian variant of the word divine is seros, instead of theos, as the note says here in 4. And this is a divine man. It's not godlike, but it's higher, right? Aristotle contains the quote. That is the Spartans. Right? The Spartans accustomed of calling him this divine man, something divine. The Laconians are doing this. They admire a person that's divine, but these are rare people, right? The idea that anyone who is divine in this character is a person who's great. But so to this again, this is the idea. This is what we call this in statistics the peaks, the tails, the tails of human. If we're going to look at what is human, the scope of the human, the peak and the tails are the extreme. There's the peak of good, virtue, or godlikeness, and there's the peak of Okay, we got sorry for this interrupt again. So we had a problem of interruption. Um, so we talked about the British person. What is he's rare. Remember this distribution of things that and that therefore the divine person is rare, but also in the city the British person is going to be very rare. He's going to be more common. The British person will be much more common among the barbarians, okay, who lack cities. In other words, it's a very important metaphor to understand what barbarian means. At one level, it means the other, the stranger, but it also means those who lack a polis, the political life. They're less developed. In other words, there is this idea that in human development is not only this stage of, let's say, economic or way of life, but also between those who have the rise of the polis or the rise of the political, and that the political community becomes, instead of simply just kin household relations and economic relations and mastery. This is the things that do. The pre-political relations are mastery, despotic care, parental care and love, right? And then the other one is that of economics, or trade, commerce, or the things of the household, right? Economicals, um, trade, commerce, trade, and things like that. These are the pre-political in that sense. They're there that the political emerges higher. There's something common, a common that holds them together, that they share a life together in that sense. And this is what, therefore, we could say civic man, right? The political man, the civic man. This is remember the word for civic in Latin comes from polis, like city, right? The civitas. That's the civitas is the thing, the noun, and then the adjectival form would be civic, right? Civilis, right? And that therefore this is the origins of political. The civil and the political are the same thing in this sense, in this classical sense. So that the political man, therefore outside of political man is the barbarian. So again, I'm sorry the digression, but I think it helps us to understand what it's saying here, and that this is also another thing. In other words, especially, but in also some cases when, therefore, through diseases and defect, man becomes bad. In other words, less than he becomes brutish, a savage, right? Something he becomes no longer in that sense. This is like this. So he goes, and such is the bad name brutish we give to those human beings who exceed the rest in vice. So it's interesting. They exceed also the brutish is those we give it the bad name brutish in this sense, right? To those human beings who exceed the rest of other human beings in vice. But some mention some mention of this sort of dispossession must be made later. What concerns vice was spoken of before. In other words, we have to talk about this exhibition here a little bit more about this brutishness. Vice we've already talking about. So we're not going to talk about brutishness. We're not also going to talk about the divine character either. That's interesting. Therefore, of these three things, it's the middle. The first we talked about already. The one we need to come back to, but the middle term. This is what we're going to focus on. So, so, but as for what concerns the lack of self-restraint, akrasia, softness and delicacy, self-restraint, concerns lack of self-restraint, softness and delicacy, delicacy, delicacy must be spoken about, and as well as what concerns self-restraint and steadfastness. So that's this concerns self-restraint and steadfastness. So this is interesting that self-restraint, the lack of accuracy, or having self-restraint, which is an enkratia, okay, must and steadfast, being, you know, for it must not be assumed either that each of the two, that is self-restraint or lack of self-restraint, or that is enkratia or akratia, right? Steadfast or softness. So steadfast and softness. Again, when I took a think of this channel, this thing here we've discussed here, this reminds me once again of The Prince, Machiavellian The Prince, where he talked about chapter 15, where the things that men, things for which men are especially praised or blamed. We go through the lists of what virtues and vices, or those characteristics of that. And again, this is something interesting that we have this tension here now. It's interesting here that of the three, a self-restraint, lack of self-restraint, softness, and delicacy, right? But then he talks about here steadfastness, and so, in other words, we have three criteria here, but then at the thing here, self-restraint and steadfast. Three has two, and therefore self-restraint, lack of self-restraint leads to self-restraint. A softness leads to steadfastness, right? Softness, steadfastness, softness. But no opposite connection here in that sense between delicacy. Okay, that's weird in that sense. So it's 3-2, right, here in that first sentence, and he goes that each of the two concern the same characteristic as virtue and corruption, respectively, or that each of is a, or that each is of a different genre. In other words, is it a question of what concerns this, a kind of like the question of virtue, the correct, a virtue and corruption, respectively, or are these things different genius, right? They're genus, what they are, of different things of a different class or a species or things, genus. But just as in the other cases as well, after positing the phenomena, right? Um, Literally things that appear or comes to sight. Ta phenomena. This is where phenomena comes from, right? Literally, this is the things that appear or come to sight. This is where the origin of the word phenomena comes from, right? Um, uh, 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 just as in the case, after positing the phenomena, things and first raising perplexities about them, one ought in this way to bring to light, reveal, um, shine on, reveal and shine on, especially all the received opinions about these experiences, again, or passions, pathe. The word pathos is loosely used here of all states of soul. Hence, they are hexis or character. So therefore, he's following Burnett's interpretation of the passions, the pathe. I think we should keep about these passions. We bring to light the experience about these passions, not hexis. The word is not hexis. The word in Greek here is pathe, right? Or filling that the greatest number. In other words, these passions or drives, these drives, these drives. This is where you can understand it in that sense. It's understanding it as a drive, especially the received opinions about these drives, passions, is this direction towards which we're doing things. Why do we do things? So therefore, first is we look at the phenomena, things we see, things that we feel, perplexing about them. And the way to bring to light, especially these received opinions about these things that drive us. Remember, self-restraint, in other words, it's about what? Doing what we ought to do. So what drives us in that sense? And that we do it or don't do it, fail to do it. That we are soft versus steadfast. What are the thing What are the what is the motivation? What is the thing that drives us towards or drives us away from? Um, and that's how I think this is. We should understand the passions in a sense, not experience. I think experience is the wrong word. It's not a hex. I think Burnett. I would disagree with Burnett here in his argument that all these are character. In other, Luther translates as hence they are hexes, no, characteristics. No, I think they're not. And why, if it were, why wouldn't Aristotle then use hexes? I think he would have used hexes if he meant them to be characteristics, because he uses every time he wants to talk about characteristics, he explicitly uses hexes. So no, it's not a characteristic in this. I think that's misleading understanding of that here. Um, feeling that the greater number and most authoritative of those opinions, right? In other words, if we can't bring to light and, in other words, raise the complexity of this of all the opinions, received opinions, right, about these drives. But if we can't do that, then look at the greatest number and the most authoritative of these opinions. So we have to do a thing. We have to look at this is our investigation. If we're going to investigate this, we should either after positing the phenomena, right, the phenomena, and first raising perplexities about them, one ought in this way to bring to light, reveal, especially all the opinions about these drives. We should do that. But if we can't do that, failing that, the greatest number, what is the ones that the ones that occur most, right? And what? The most authoritative of the opinions about these things. And most authoritative of those opinions. We're looking at the opinions about these things. For the vexing questions, the word derea was disagreeable or offensive things. In other words, the word disagreeable can also mean disagreeable or offensive things. So let's go. Let's for if the vexing disagreeable. For if the disagreeable questions or issues are solved, if the disagreeable problems or issues are solved, and the received opinions remain standing, right? That the problem is the if the disagreeable thing or the thing we having um, or offensive. Remember, it's disagreeable or offensive. I think vexing is too weak. In other words, for the question, these disagreeable things we disagree about, or offensive things that we take offense to, are solved. Are solved, and the received opinion remains standing, then matters would be adequately explained. So therefore, we kind of an Occam's razor here. In other words, if we resolve the problem, if we solve the issue, in other words, the vexing issue, or what is he says here, the disagreeable or the offensive thing are solved, and the opinion, the received opinion about it, remains standing as well, then it's explained. Kind of an oxen razors thing. Now, self-restraint and steadfastness seem to fall among things serious and praiseworthy. So these are the serious, dios and worthy of praise. Self-restraint and steadfastness are that. Both lack of self-restraint as well as softness among things base and blame lack of self-restraint as well as softness among things base and blameworthy. So are among the things. I think the things base and blameworthy. I think but it's missing the missing article here. So it's actually interesting. This is the question: is there an article? Is there a translation error, or is there a missing article in the Greek? I think there's a missing article. I think they're good about that. I'm not going to complain about Collins and Bartlett's anal attentive enough as a textual guy that he might make they might make an error on an interpretation and translation, but on a textual issue, I would just no. I just quickly looked at the Greek and no, they're right. There's no the there, so it's interesting. There should be a the there among in other words, the, in other words, these things are praiseworthy, but these things are among things base and plainworthy. Softness. There's something wrong with the English here. The lack of self restraint as well as softness. Are missing are right. If these are that right, these seem to among fall among things serious and praiseworthy. The lack of a self restraint as well as softness. These things fall. In other words, they fall. That's the verb, right? The same verb connection among the base and the things among things base and blameworthy. The self-restrained person seems to be the same as someone who abides by his calculation. In other words, the one who has self-restraint seems to be the same as one who abides by his calculation. He makes a calculation and agrees with and executes it, right? The person lacking self-restraint seems to be the one who departs from his calculation. He makes a calculation. And this is this idea calculating between what is right, what is the correct action. This idea of the calculation, this idea of, and after the word calculation is word logo. It's connected to logos. In fact, it is an application of it's discerning the truthfulness of the act, the truthfulness of what is correct, and the way to do it, way to achieve it. Right. In other words, it discerns what is the correct end. Right. I have the thing I need to do. What is the thing I must do? What is the right choice, and how to get it. That is the virtue in that act, and that the calculation of that is the mental calculation of that, or the use of logos reasoning to achieve that. And I think I would be careful about using because we moderns would discern. The later moderns will discern between calculate. We want to discern between virtue and calculation, reasoning and calculation. The virtue people tended to say, "Oh, mere calculation is base," and this takes us back to that point that we talk about, in previous book, at the end, last two chapters of the previous book, which deals with this question. There's a kind of discernment of the calculation that is cunning, right? The negative is a calculation that is not tied to virtue or the good things. Then there's the calculation that is so calculation and prudence is not the same thing. That this what he talked about earlier in that chapter. Now he uses a calculation here, this reasoning, the reasoning here. He's focusing on the reasoning here, right? The reasoning and the way the logos operates here. That calculates the person lacking self-restraint. So therefore, the one who does this is agreement between his calculation. He executes it and does not he abides by it, okay, where the other one departs from it, right? Moreover, the person lacking self-restraint, knowing what he does is, in other words, moreover, the person lacking self-restraint, right, knowing that what he does is base, acts on account of his passions. In other words, some passion is driving him, his emotion, some passion, some want or desire is moving him, that he doesn't do it. Okay, he knows his reason tells him what to do, his calculation tells him what to do, but his passions overcome his reason in Platonic language, right? While the self-restrained person, knowing that his desires are base, does not follow them on account of his reason, of his love, his reason. In other words, his calculation and his reason. Because of his calculation and his reason. In other words, he listens too higher to his reason. And though it is said, the moderate person, okay, the, the mesos, the moderate person, is self-restrained. The I think the moderate or sophisunes. Is it sophisunes? Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted again. This is moderate here is of it's the root of sophosuna. This is why that he's translating sophosunes moderation, right? It's sophon. Sophron is the sound mind of sound mind person. And this is why I wish he didn't do this. He was being too, but they're again they're being a little bit traditionalist. They're giving a blink to tradition. I wish they didn't. Here, I wish they were a little bit more literal to the Greek, uh, because the sound-minded person, the person of sound mind, is self-restrained and steadfast, and that some assert that the person of this latter sort is sound-minded in all respect. That's where suphasune comes in, right? Sound mind. While others deny it, right? Others deny it. The moderate person is this later sort of this. Some others will deny it. So therefore, this becomes a question: is the sophisunos, the one who has sophisunos, are they always in self restraint? Do they always peer self restraint in that sense? This is interesting. So therefore, the person lacking self restraint, and knowing that he does his base, he doesn't have passions. But the one who, again, this leads us to the question of there is something similar to the sophosune in the discussion of moderation that is talked about here, right? That some kind of moderation, that the moderate person is self-restraint and steadfast, and some person assert that the latter sort is moderate, right? In all respects, right? And others deny it, and some assert that the licentious person, lacks self-restraint, and the person lacking self-restraint is licentious without discriminating between them. But others assert that they are different. So therefore, this is a problem. Is this problem of acrasia? He's saying here, and this is the question: is this question of self-restraint or lack of self-restraint merely a question of sophosune or moderation, the virtue of sophosune, and there was the excess and defect that goes back all the way earlier about the question of passions, right? Or is it something different? Is there something here that is the question of this really just a rehashing of the question of moderation, or sophosune, right? That we dealt with in book 3, the end of book 3, right? The two virtues of courage and sophosune, right? Last two sections did this, 4 chapters on courage, I think 3 on sophosune, right? In book 3, all the way back in book 3. So some say they are, and that they're connected, but some say they're connected in the absolute sense that the sophisunis is always this way, so there is this connection here. In other words, and some assert that the licentious person lacks this self-restraint, and the person lacking self-restraint is licentious, without discriminating between them. But others assert there are different, right? Some people deny that the prudent person can be without self-restraint, whereas some assert they assert that some who are prudent and terrifically clever do lack, and terrifically clever. I go back to that thing, that terrifically clever in that sense, do lack self-restraint. So that's a very interesting. Leads us back to that discussion all the way there, that they're terrifically clever. But they are prudent, but in this moment they're really not pursuing the perfectly just, but something maybe not noble in that sense, something, an item that is not or cannot be, but it's better than the alternative, right? Do lack self-restraint, do lack self-restraint. In other words, the prudent person who's generally prudent, but in this case, they're being and they're terrifically clever, do lack this, right? other words, or they are prudent in that what they do. This takes us back to the last penultimate chapter of book 6, right? Further, people are said to lack self-restraint also in points of spiritedness, honor, and gain, benefit, right? So this question of this leads us not only to the body passions, but also it may be into the question of spiritedness, right? In other words, not only pleasure and pain, but also of what of spiritedness, honor, and gain as well. Those two, the virtues. Therefore, these are the scope of the virtues of the. In other words, these are the virtues. These virtues of spiritedness, honor, and gain are the virtues that are the rest of the virtues of book 4, right, of the ethics. And he ends this. Now, this is why this ends this chapter, and we've been talking about this a long time. These then are the statements made on this subject. So he's kind of giving us a review, the statements. This is kind of like an overview on of what are the opinions of this are, right? The opinions of this are, and this is how we end the first chapter. Okay, let's stop here. We did it. It's longish. I bet it's going to be longer. I know we had interruptions. I apologize for them and breaks, and I may be repetitive. If you like the video, hit the like button. Hit it. If you liked it, please, because it helps the algorithm. If you want to share it online, share it on your social media, share it with your friends, forward it, bring attention to others. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and it gets the things about this. We're really wanting to grow the channel. And that if you didn't like it, now if you didn't like it, did something wrong, you can always hit thumbs down, but say why in the comments so people can benefit from it. Okay? What is the reason why you don't like it? That this way there can be benefit of this and things like that. Another thing you can do is you can, if you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me on social media. Links are below. If you want to know more about me and my scholarship and my research and things like that, you can follow the academic social media links below that, the kind of academic media that links you to my article, research, and things like that, and more about me as a scholar. Then if you want to help me to do what I do, you want to financially assist me in some way, you can do so through Patreon on a Subscribe Star with the URL links below. And then if the way you can help is that you can buy one of my books, the 3 books that are currently available listed below. You can buy it through your local bookstore or a book dealer, or you can by either ordering it or order them, because it may not be at your bookstore, or if you ask them or help the bookstore out by ordering it, or you can order it through an online distributor like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Libris, or any of these things like this, or you can go to the publishers directly. If you're going to, I would hope that those of you who are interested in my notebook for Aristotle's Politics, go to the publisher directly and order it, because this way I get the money. Unlike the other publishers, Lulu will give me the profit that the bookstores get. So it would be, it might be okay. I understand Lulu may charge you shipping, where Amazon may not. Okay, whatever. I understand that, but I'll get more money if you buy it from Lulu. I get it, and I will get it, unlike my other publishers. That's it. Have a good day. We turn to chapter 2 next time we meet. Take care. Bye-bye.